fast. He also indicated that we have 94 minutes of margin remaining, so plenty of time to work through this. That 94 minutes is basically the amount of time that the Crew-6 the Crew-6 crew has in this position while still being able to basically maintain capability to perform a re-rendezvous.
That's plenty of margin, and again, flight control teams are continuing to assess that. They continue to monitor the prop levels, and you can see, even on the right, the camera from the external side of the International Space Station, you can see those firings of the Draco engines, keeping the Dragon in place, holding at 20 meters. That's what we're monitoring, those prop levels. Now, again, a quick reminder, that doesn't mean that at the 94 minutes from now, we run out of prop.
Right.
It just means that for the hold position, we have about 94 minutes here, and then if we need to break out, there's plenty of prop to execute additional maneuvers. They really try to minimize the prop usage on a nominal trajectory up there just for moments like this. If you need to hold for 2 hours, you can hold for 2 hours. You have the prop in order to do that, and then reassess later with the prop you need to execute additional maneuvers. So
yeah, that's exactly right, and that's also partially why that launch time is down to the second. It's precise in order to rendezvous with the International Space Station, and just like you said, it's to that nominal ascent is the most efficient path basically to get to the International Space Station, so that there is leeway or flexibility for situations like this where these hold points are built in and that margin is available if necessary. So once again, Dragon continuing to hold there at waypoint 2, 20 meters away from the zenith port of the International Space Station. Live views coming from inside Dragon Endeavour. They're on the left-hand side of your screen. We have Commander Steve Bowen on that seat to the left, and to his right is Woody Hoburg, who is the pilot. It seems like they have their arms up, but they are in microgravity, so their hands are actually just floating there. It's a pretty comfortable position. That view on the left-hand side of your screen is coming from the Dragon capsule that is on the right-hand side of your screen. It's a thermal image of that zenith port, which is the intended destination. In this view, we should be able to see some of that, some of the firings of the Draco thrusters as Dragon maintains its position there at waypoint 2. As I mentioned before, this view is a little deceiving because we can't see, planet Earth for that frame of reference. So it looks like everything is just at a standstill, but of course it's orbiting Earth, meaning it's going incredibly fast. But right. Still in position, or it looks like it's still with relative position to the ISS. Right.
It kind of looks black too. Of course, there are plenty of stars in the sky, but a lot of what's being played with the camera on the outside of the station is exposure. The sun is illuminating the side of the capsule, so we're not able to make out a lot of the stars. There's also atmosphere that affects that, so that's why you see that blackness. But there's going to be a lot of sunlight from where we are now. The station is 261 statute miles over the Mediterranean Sea. It just passed the southern coast of Italy on a southeastern track, and it's morning over in Europe, so it's going to make its way southeast. We're going to be passing over Egypt soon, and make our way down, and we'll be in this sunlight position for a while. And a reminder that this is joint operations between the teams here in Hawthorne and, of course, the teams over in the International Space Station Flight Control Room in Houston, Texas. Everybody's got to give their go before proceeding with docking today. But once we hear that, we'll start to see motion. The Dragon will make its way from this view down. It'll make its way towards the Earth.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop for status.
SpaceX Dragon, go ahead.
We have a software override command that will allow Dragon to continue to docking. Again, teams have verified that Dragon is in the correct docking configuration. Ground will be sending the override command. Ground will then pull for another go, and then brief crew when ready to resume. How copy?
SpaceX Dragon on the big loop, you were cut off.
Copy, Dragon. I'll repeat. We have a software override command that will allow Dragon to continue to docking. Again, teams have verified that Dragon is in the correct docking configuration. Ground will be sending the override command, and then pull for another go, and then brief crew when ready to resume. How copy?
SpaceX Dragon, copy, I'll understand, and we'll be ready for the pull and our actions.
All right, good news there coming from SpaceX Core David Huang, letting the Crew-6 know, letting the Crew-6 crew, letting them know that the teams have worked through that override.
Station Houston on the big loop for comm.
Go ahead on 2, David.
Hey Josh, just for your essay, you may have noticed in voice test that we don't have space ground 3 and 4. That's because we've gone to our KU mask. We'll regain that at 0651, just for your essay. We don't need it for docking.
Okay, appreciate the heads up. 0651 to get KU back.
As we were saying before, we just got confirmation that the teams here on the ground will be pushing that software override through up to Dragon Endeavor, and that there will be another poll for go for docking, and the crew will then receive final instruction, basically that final go. So that if that override is being pushed through, currently, that should take hopefully just a couple of minutes. As we said before, we had 2 hours of margin to hold here at waypoint 2, 20 meters away from the International Space Station. So we're still well within that margin. And as the SpaceX Core indicated, that the teams were looking to get it done right, not fast. And so we're pleased to hear that the solution has been identified and is being pushed up to the capsule.
And that call you heard from Mission Control in Houston up to Josh Cassada is confirming that the KU link is currently masked until 12:51 a.m. Central Time, 10:51 p.m. Pacific Time. So right now the teams on both sides are polling.
Houston on 2 for Frank and exercise. Due to the exercise constraints with the hold we're in, we're going to defer your 0T2 ops and your A-Red that are hard scheduled for today.
Copy on 2, thank you.
That was Frank Rubio aboard the space station confirming. Unfortunately, he's going to have to delay his exercise for the day. The T2 being the stationary bicycle, A-Red being the sort of a weightlifting machine that's configured for microgravity, so it uses hydraulics. But they want to minimize loads, impacts, vibrations on the International Space Station for docking operations, so they're going to hold on that for a little bit. I was mentioning the KU mask. That's going to be in effect until 10:51 p.m. Pacific, 12:51 a.m. Central, which means as the teams are polling, you can see the flight control teams here in Hawthorne. They're also polling with the International Space Station flight control teams to proceed past waypoint 2 in for a docking. If we do that very shortly, we may not get KU, which means we may not get views. It depends on if we get pass over a ground station or not. We may get views from the Dragon. Not a requirement to press in for docking. There's a lot of other factors that are more important than getting those views. So we'll see. We'll stand by for those teams to continue their poll.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop for approach 2.
SpaceX Dragon, any copy?
Ground has pulled go for approach 2. Confirm crew readiness for final approach and that visors are down. As a reminder that once Dragon is inside the crew hands-off point, retreat and breakout are not permitted. How copy?
SpaceX Dragon copies all. Our visors are down and the crew is ready to resume.
Copy, Steve. Dragon is go to command resume.
All right, so great news there coming from SpaceX Core indicating that poll for docking was conducted.
SpaceX Dragon, we have resumed.
The poll for docking was conducted once again.
Dragon is in approach 2 prep.
Go for docking, and we're now in prep for to approach the International Space Station.
It's a 30-second pause before the Draco engines start firing to get us closer to the International Space Station. So we'll hear another call once Dragon is in motion. Now again,
Dragon is in approach 2 and continuing to station.
here we go.
Station Houston on the big loop. Dragon is resuming approach and is go for docking. Monitor percepts 5 and 6 and 1.102. Dragon approach and retreat monitoring.
Station copies. We are in steps 5 and 6.
Now, if we can bring you views from inside the capsule, again, we will try. Unfortunately, we don't have any live views at the moment. However, those crew displays that the crew has available to monitor progress, they actually will have a live camera basically showing how close they are to that the zenith port, and they are able to monitor the progress again, being able to see which Draco thrusters are firing when. But we're looking forward to seeing the crew continue on this docking journey.
Now, even though we don't have views, we are getting telemetry, so we're coming up on, we are making some motion. It's just a little bit, we did increase a little bit of distance while we were at the hold point, so we got out to about 25 meters, so now we're making our way in. We're at about 20 meters now. We'll stand by for contact and capture. You heard that reiteration from the ground of that crew hands-off point. That will be called up to the crew. It's called CHOP. They make an acronym for it. So you'll know that the crew cannot issue an abort command at that point. But right now we're looking good. 18 meters in closing.
Live view there of SpaceX Mission Control. That is where we've been hearing those core updates come from. But at this point in time, Dragon is back to closing that distance, as Gary said, closing that distance for docking. There will be a soft capture first, then followed by hard capture. We saw that soft capture ring in earlier views of the Dragon capsule. So that soft capture ring will be...
Copy, 10 meters.
A call from inside Dragon Endeavor, 10 meters in closing. We'll get those calls from the crew, including CHOP, and then confirmation of contact and capture. Visuals are not a requirement to proceed with docking, so even though we don't have KO, even though we don't have videos, we do have plenty of telemetry coming down to give us the confidence we need. And of course, we have the crew aboard Dragon Endeavor and International Space Station that are witnessing the action now.
Once again, Dragon is making its way, closing the final meters between itself and the International Space Station, specifically the Zenith port.
Dragon 5 meters.
Copy, 5 meters.
Only 5 meters to go.
It's a slow and methodical approach. Progress seems to be good for the crew aboard Dragon. Of course, Josh Cassada and Nicole Mann are inside the International Space Station monitoring. There are safeguards in place if needed, but right now we're looking pretty good.
Once again, we'll bring those live views whenever we have them. Unfortunately, they're not available at this moment in time, but those visuals are not required.
Dragon 2 meters.
Copy, 2 meters.
The crew is monitoring, as you can tell from those callouts from inside Dragon Endeavour. Those
Meter.
last meter to go.
Copy, 1 meter. Dragon, SpaceX on the big loop, soft capture confirmed.
SpaceX Dragon copies. Thank you.
That's soft capture occurring at 10:40 p.m. Pacific Time, 12:40 a.m. Central Time. International Space Station and Dragon were 261 statute miles off the coast of Somalia in eastern Africa.
It's great news there. Now, of course, as we were saying before, everything is scheduled. It's step by step, and there are still a few steps to complete before Dragon.
Soft capture ring retraction in progress.
Still a few steps to go before Dragon is securely attached to the station. So there we just heard the call out that that soft capture ring retraction was in progress.
That soft capture ring is pulling the Dragon Endeavour in closer for the next series of steps, which will be closing those hooks. There are 12 hooks, and they'll close 6 at a time. And once all 12 hooks are engaged, that confirms a hard capture. In the meantime, on the International Space Station side, they're working an intricate series of attitude control maneuvers to allow minimal loads during this ring retraction process, using gyros and other thrusters, mostly disabled at this point.
In the next couple minutes, we'll hear updates regarding the hard capture sequence. We should hear a call out in the next minute or two indicating that the hard capture sequence has begun. That will take about 4 minutes, and at that point in time, we will have a complete hard dock, at which docking will basically be complete at that point in time. Of course, more time before the side hatch is opened and the crews get to greet each other on board station. But as of right now, we have had confirmation that the soft capture ring retraction is complete. That's the part that, as Gary just said, pulls the Dragon capsule in toward the International Space Station. And then next up, we will have that hard capture sequence start.
Flight controllers are monitoring the soft capture ring retraction, and everything's looking good so far. They mentioned the soft capture ring. The Dragon is inside the vestibule, so that's important. It's pulling it in, lining up those hooks to begin that hard capture sequence that you were mentioning. Again, visuals are not a requirement for this process. We're getting plenty of telemetry and confidence from the teams on the ground. Things are proceeding nominally. Of course, those readouts from the crew aboard Dragon and the International Space Station monitoring as well. Everything's looking good.
If you've recently joined, Dragon had a pretty smooth journey to the International Space Station. They launched from Kennedy Space Center.
Dragon, SpaceX on the big loop, ring retraction complete. Docking sequence is holding for MCS reconfiguration.
SpaceX Dragon copies.
Flight control teams monitoring a good ring retraction. Right now they're pausing to allow International Space Station attitude to configure. I mentioned a series of intricate maneuvers to make sure to minimize the loads on the Dragon through the docking process. Once those hooks are engaged, they can go back to a nominal configuration. But in the meantime, there's this pause. Of course, we'll be standing by for that hard capture sequence. We did upload that software override for the hooks. That'll be an important milestone to make sure that those hooks engage for a hard capture, so we'll stand by and wait for that. But again, we did have a soft capture confirmed at 10:40 p.m. Pacific time, 12:40 a.m. Central time. And again, the ISS and the Dragon were off the coast of Somalia in Eastern Africa at the time of docking.
As I was saying earlier, the crew had a pretty smooth ride up to the International Space Station, lifting off just roughly over 24 hours ago from Kennedy Space Center in Florida. And yeah, pretty smooth ascent phase. We did have that issue with Hook 5.
Dragon Station, this is Houston on the Big Loop. MCS configured, proceeding with hook driving.
Yeah, so the hook driving is now about to begin. As I was saying, there was a software override that was sent up to the Dragon capsule from the teams on the ground in order to resolve the faulty sensor on Hook 5. That Hook 5 being one of the hooks that is now being used to drive that hard capture. All in all, aside from that minor issue that the teams were able to resolve in a few minutes, a pretty smooth ride to space. I'm sure they're excited to eventually open the door and see their friends.
The hooks are deployed. There are 12 total hooks to help us have a hard capture, and they're in 2 sets of 6 called gangs. The first gang of 6, we're hearing good calls from the flight control teams. They are driving as expected.
Once again, Dragon Endeavour now underway with the hard capture, the driving of those 12 hooks, as Gary just mentioned, operating in 2 sets of 6. The first set sounds like everything is going well. The second set to follow. And once hard capture is complete, that basically means that Dragon will have docked. Now, this is Dragon has driven itself autonomously to the space station, so at this point in time, the crew continues to monitor the progress as those hooks drive. And they are following along with their crew displays and, of course, listening in to information being provided from the teams here at SpaceX Mission Control, which you see there on your screen, as well as from the mission control teams at Johnson Space Center over in Houston, Texas.
Now, of course, we were holding at that 20-meter marker for some time, so if you're following along, we're going to continue our coverage to make sure that the hooks drive.
Station on the Big Loop, we see is complete with 1.102, and we've got about 45 minutes to get this place straightened up.
Josh, we copy and concur. Sounds good.
All right, and from the ground teams, we heard the first gang of 6 hooks have driven, and they look like they're in a good configuration. The second set of hooks, another 6, are currently driving. We'll continue to monitor the progress of those. Again, once these hooks are driven, that is that hard dock to the International Space Station. It kicks off another series of steps They'll be able to doff or take off their suits once the Dragon is fully engaged to the International Space Station for that hard dock, and they'll go through a series of steps to get those hatches open, and that'll take some time. Again, we were holding at that 20-meter hold point for quite some time, so if you're following along with our coverage and want to continue with our coverage, we'll hand it over to the Johnson Space Center to take us through hatch opening and the welcome ceremony. Everything is shifting slightly to the right. If you're following in Central Time, we're looking at hatches open approximately 2:18, and then a welcome ceremony around 3 a.m. Central Time. Of course, those are approximate. They'll have to go through the procedures, and we'll monitor KU, but just to give our viewers a good indication of what we're looking at so far, for those who want to stick around and see the astronauts of Expedition 68 welcome Crew-6, who are also joining Expedition 68.
That's right. So as we said, the second set of hooks is currently driving. The first set got good readout there, and sounds like that first set of 6 is complete. The second set of 6 now underway. And as Gary mentioned, still a number of steps to go through prior to egressing Dragon capsule and greeting their friends on board the International Space Station, such as being able to doff their suits. They'll be able to take their suits off and store them.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, docking sequence complete, or hard capture complete, correction.
SpaceX Dragon copy, hard capture complete.
Beautiful view there from the cameras on board the International Space Station. That is the Crew-6 capsule, as it has just completed the hard capture. Docking sequence not quite yet complete, but hard capture is complete. That is the zenith port of the ISS.
That's a great indication of the hooks, too. All 12 hooks are engaged in place, looking good. Next series of steps, that soft capture ring that was used in the first leg of the docking sequence is going to retract. There's also an umbilical that is deployed from the Dragon and connects the Dragon to the International Space Station. Dragon at this point has been relying on its batteries and the solar arrays that you can see. That black portion of the unpressurized trunk, that from this view is sort of at the top of where the Dragon is. It's been relying on battery power, but once it's hooked up, it'll draw some power from the International Space Station, which of course has solar arrays to provide plenty of power through once they configure the Dragon for the quiescent stage, where it will remain for approximately 6 months while the Crew-6 astronauts become expedition members and conduct science, maintenance, and upgrades for the next 6 months in 2023.
So at this point in time, we're just waiting to hear the confirmation that the docking sequence is completed. We're expecting the core to give a call to the crew to indicate that they can doff their spacesuits, and just to let them know that that entire docking sequence is complete. We did get confirmation that the hard capture portion was complete. So awaiting that awaiting that call from SpaceX core. Once again, that is the Crew-6 capsule that just completed that hard capture with those 12 hooks.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, docking sequence complete. Crew Dragon Endeavour, Steve, Woody, Sultan, Andre, after a brief scenic detour, welcome to the International Space Station.
SpaceX Dragon copies, we're happy to be here.
On behalf of SpaceX, it has been a pleasure working with you. Ground will be enabling hardline power and comm connection shortly. You are go to doff suits per procedure 4.012 and will bring cameras external.
SpaceX Dragon copies, and we'll be picking up 4012. Thanks very much for getting us here.
All right, great news there from SpaceX Core indicating that Dragon has completed its docking sequence. The spacecraft.
Dragon, this is Houston on the big loop. Sultan, Andre, Woody, and Steve. Ahlan wa sahlan, Dobry Pajalavat, and welcome to the International Space Station. From your training teams, your execution teams, and your friends and family, we're all so incredibly proud of you and are excited for your expedition. You guys really are living testimony that the ISS is a joint human effort, and your unique crew truly exemplifies that. Now let's work towards getting this hatch open so you can go hug your crewmates.
Houston, Dragon, copies all. Thank you very much. And we're looking forward to a very good increment.
So now that
Dragon on Dragon ground, no response required. Cameras are exterior.
Dragon Station, Expedition 68 welcomes you. We can't wait to get you aboard and inside the International Space Station.
all right, now that Dragon has completed.
Station Dragon copies are waiting on you, Josh.
Now that
Yeah, I'm checking Optimus. I show you guys 3 days late.
And now that Dragon has completed the docking sequence, spacecraft must undergo a handful of checks before we will be able to open that hatch. The crew on board Dragon will now get a chance to get out of their suits before moving into those hatch operations.
That's right, and things will be picking up inside the station too as NASA's Josh Cassada gets the hatch on the station side ready to be opened, and then they start pressurizing that area known as the vestibule between the Dragon and the station hatches. So with Dragon fully docked, that's going to do it for us here in Hawthorne, but our coverage for Crew-6 won't stop here.
We're going to toss it over to Rob at Mission Control Houston to take us through the vestibule depressurization and hatch opening, and when we'll see NASA astronaut Stephen Bowen, Woody Hoberg, along with United Arab Emirates astronaut Sultan Al-Nayati and Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrei Fedyaev float into the International Space Station. But first, quick recap of how they got here. It started several hours ago, more than I guess would be about 28 hours ago. They suited up in the ONC building at Kennedy Space Center. They rode out to pad 39A. They had a successful ingress. Of course, a liftoff from Kennedy Space Center, pad 39A at 12:34 a.m. Eastern Time. Today, technically, I had to check the clock, or excuse me, 12:34 a.m. Eastern Time. And we had successful stage 1 landing, of course, Dragon separation, nose cone deploy. We saw that nose cone open as Dragon was approaching the International Space Station. Of course, those 5 major burns that the capsule completed to get closer to the International Space Station. And then we just had docking a couple minutes ago on today, Friday, March 3rd.
And again, that docking time was 10:40 p.m. Pacific time, 12:40 a.m. Eastern time, or Central time rather, on the 3rd. So if you're tracking in Eastern time, that's 1:40 a.m. And now that Crew-6 has arrived, we're looking ahead to the return of Crew-5. We'll be taking you along as Nicole Mann, Josh Cassada, Koichi Wakata, and Anna Kikina return home after their long-duration stay aboard the station. Teams are assessing return dates, which will be announced on nasa.gov, so be sure to tune in as NASA and SpaceX bring you live coverage every step of their journey. Be sure to follow SpaceX and NASA on social media for real-time updates. So thanks again for watching. Go NASA, go SpaceX, and go Crew-6, and of course Crew-5 too. We'll now hand it over to Rob at the Johnson Space Center in Houston to continue sharing the mission as the crew prepares to board their home for the next 6 months, the International Space Station. For those of you watching on the SpaceX YouTube channel, please head over to NASA TV to follow the coverage live.
Sorry, I know it was really bad, but I couldn't resist.
Yep, I've heard it up here at least 3 times.
This is Mission Control Houston. Thanks a lot to Gary and Kate for carrying the water as we moved into a docking at the International Space Station just a few minutes ago at 12:40 a.m. Central Time, 1:40 a.m. Eastern Time, about 23 minutes behind schedule to allow the engineers at SpaceX in Hawthorne to complete some troubleshooting with their software for one of the hooks. Again, the engineers at Hawthorne spent just a few minutes playing it safe, making sure that the software was properly configured for one of the hooks and the docking mechanism for the Crew Dragon Endeavour. A bit of bulky software that gave a micro switch indication that it was not in the right configuration, even though the hooks were verified to be open and in good shape. So it took just a few extra minutes to verify that software, and the command was issued to override the software and allow Dragon to reinitiate its final approach, the final few meters, for contact capture, and 11 minutes later, the closing of all of those hooks to form a hard mate for the vehicle to the zenith port, the space-facing port of the Harmony module of the International Space Station that you see right there in the field of view. The International Space Station and the newly arrived Crew-6 crew are currently flying 260 miles above the planet, as the work now will focus on the leak checks that will be conducted on the station's side of the docking interface between Endeavour and the Harmony module. Once those leak checks are complete, pressure in the small passageway or vestibule that connects the Crew Dragon with Harmony will be conducted to make sure that we have pressure equalized between the two vehicles before the hatches are open. By docking just a few minutes behind schedule, we are expecting a hatch opening to occur somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2:18 a.m. Central Time. Of course, that's not an exact science, so we'll be standing by for updates as we move along here. With the welcoming ceremony, the Crew-6 crew coming on board to be greeted by their Expedition 68 counterparts that they will join now for the next several days, and for the next several days until Crew-5 departs. The welcoming ceremony expected just after 3 a.m. Central Time, 4 a.m. Eastern Time. If you're wondering about the demarcation of these expeditions, the newly arrived Crew-6 crew of Steve Bowen, Woody Hoberg, Sultan Al-Niyati, and Andrei Fedyaev, they will join the International Space Station as Expedition 68 crew members. They will become Expedition 69 crew members on March 28th when the Soyuz MS-22 vehicle, the damaged vehicle that incurred a coolant leak back in mid-December, when that vehicle undocks, that will mark the official beginning of Expedition 69. Once the welcoming ceremony is complete, there'll be a safety briefing that will span about 30 to 45 minutes, led by Station Commander Sergei Prokopiev of Roscosmos, before the crew presses ahead to have a meal on board the station and to begin the handover that will span about the next 5 days, leading to the departure of the Crew-5 crew, Commander Nicole Mann and crewmates Josh Cassada, Koichi Wakata of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Anna Kikina. They are scheduled to depart the station around March 9th. A specific undocking date is going to be analyzed and selected over the next few days. Say again?
ISS power connection established. Right on through. Houston Station on the big loop. Sorry, missed that call. We got some hissing and probably 30 seconds left of the timer.
Josh, we copy. I'll wait till the hissing's done.
This is Mission Control Houston. Once again, you're looking at the newly arrived Crew Dragon Endeavour, hard-mated to the international docking adapter on the space-facing port of the Harmony module of the International Space Station. Within the next few minutes, leak checks will be initiated to begin the process over the next orbit of the Earth to ensure that we have a tight seal at the docking interface between Endeavour and the Harmony module.
Houston Station on the big loop. Step 2.3 is complete and time is 0709.
Josh, we copy 0709, and the call I was going to make earlier was, hey, we would love to come on board with you if you all will get us an internal view.
Absolutely, no problem. Let's see, would you like node 2, camera 1 or 2?
Oh, Josh, you're putting the pressure on me, make me make a decision. We'll go with node 2, thanks.
Okay, copy that. And in fact, Frank has got these set up. So node 2, number 2 is looking station forward, and node 2, camera 1 is looking zenith for our crewmates.
Josh, we copy that. Sounds great. We'll take both.
And here in the Space Station Flight Control Room, spacecraft communicator David Brenna, working with the team under the direction of Lead Flight Director Pooja Jasrani, talking to Josh Cassida on board the station, confirming the configuration and setup of the television cameras in the Unity module of the International Space Station and the Harmony module. We're going to be coming on board into the Harmony module to which the Crew Dragon Endeavour is docked. Once again, we're going to be coming on board inside the Harmony module of the International Space Station at the hatchway to the docking interface, the vestibule as it's called, and there's your view. Work will be underway by Josh Cassida and others to configure all of the equipment and to conduct the leak checks at that docking interface over the next orbit to ensure that we have a tight seal and the precursor to the equalization of vestibule pressure that will be the stepping stone towards the opening of the hatch to allow the Crew-6 quartet, Steve Bowen, Woody Hoberg, Sultan Al-Niyati, and Andrei Fedyaev, to float on board the International Space Station and to be graded by their 7 colleagues who have been living on board the station for some time now. And another view now inside the International Space Station, Nicole Mann, who's the commander of the Crew Dragon Endurance that will be departing the International Space Station next week to complete a 6-month tour of duty on board the complex. Just to recap, the Crew Dragon Endeavour launched in the early morning hours of March 2nd, just over 24 hours ago, docking to the zenith port of the Harmony module of the station at 12:40 a.m. Central Time, 1:40 a.m. Eastern Time, setting up for the opening of the hatches that's expected around 2:18 a.m. Central, give or take a few minutes. And about 40 minutes later, we are expecting a welcoming ceremony somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 a.m. Central, 4 a.m. Eastern Time.
Dragon, Houston on the big loop. Stand by for hardline audio config.
The International Space Station and the newly arrived Crew Dragon Endeavour flying 260 miles over the South Pacific.
SpaceX Dragon copies on the big loop.
Just to the northeast of New Zealand, as you look at Nicole Mann and Josh Cassida of the Crew-6 crew, as they are awaiting the opening of the hatch, they'll be conducting leak checks and checks of the integrity at the vestibule, the small passageway that connects the Harmony module to the hatchway of Dragon, before the green light is given for the hatches to be open and for the Crew-6 crew to float on board, expanding the population of the station from 7 to 11.
And Dragon on Dragon to ground, no response required. Ground will be clearing the docking hooks not open alert from your displays.
SpaceX Dragon copies will be watched.
We should be getting a video from inside Dragon as Steve Bowen and his crewmates begin the preparation on their side of the docking interface for their own series of leak checks and preparations leading to the hatch opening on their side of the docking interface.
Hardline audio configuration is complete. How do you hear me?
Houston SpaceX copies. How do you hear us?
Dragon, Houston hears you 5 by 5.
Houston Space Dragon copy.
Hey, stand by, Josh. We're getting some time crunches here.
Okay, copy that. Thanks.
Initial leak checks on both sides of the docking interface are in progress. Everything proceeding as planned for the opening of the hatches, allowing Crew-6 to come on board for the beginning of their half year in space. You see Koichi Wakata from the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, who has been working during this rendezvous time frame in the Kibo module, that is the hatchway just off to the left of your screen.
Dragon SpaceX on Dragon to ground, low priority.
SpaceX Dragon, go ahead.
Hey, Woody, yeah, we're just looking for permission to come on board with cameras when ready.
Copy that. We got a few crew members changing, so we'll give you a call in a few minutes, and you'll be welcome to come on board then.
Copy all, Woody.
What do you hope that the crew is in the process of getting out of their launch and entry suits and getting into more comfortable clothing as they prepare for the leak checks on their side of the docking interface. We should be able to come on board to see activities inside Dragon here just a short time from now.
Station Dragon, this is Houston on 2 for timeline. Josh, you asked us a question regarding when you think hatch opening is going to be happening. We're estimating about 45 minutes from now. And also for today's timeline in general, we're expecting to be about 20 minutes down. And we're going to just look for activities that are low-hanging fruit that we can punt off of today's timeline as we can get to those. But we expect to be about 20 minutes delta to today's timeline to the right.
Okay, copy, David, and I'm not sure if that was on 2 or 3. I'm on 3 now. Understand about 45 minutes to hatch opening and 20-minute delta for the rest of the day. Thanks.
Houston Dragon copy, 20 minutes down, hatch opening 45 from now.
I'd like that was on 2. And station copies all. Thank you, David.
And Josh, back with you on 2, just to follow up for the PO event, we're expecting that to be between 8:45 and 900.
Okay, station copies.
This is Mission Control Houston. Just a bit of a refinement on the times for events coming up. Spacecraft communicator David Brenner here in Mission Control, reporting to the crew on board the International Space Station. We are expecting hatch opening about 45 minutes from now. That would be about 2:10 a.m. Central Time, 3:10 Eastern Time, if that timeline is correct. The welcoming ceremony is expected somewhere between about 2:45 and 3 a.m. Central Time. So if you're keeping track of events here in the deep overnight, that's where we're headed. And we'll keep you posted as any of those times get refined. Again, docking occurred at 12:40 a.m. Central Time, about 23 minutes behind the original schedule, with the hooks closing to form a hard mate between Crew Dragon Endeavour and the Harmony module's international docking adapter on the space-facing port at 12:51 a.m. Central Time. Once the Crew-6 crew members are on board and we conduct the welcoming ceremony, the 11 crew members on board will engage in a safety briefing, which is customary. That'll be led by Station Commander Sergei Prokopiev before handover activities begin, and the start of orientation for the newly arrived crew members on the International Space Station. Steve Bowen, no stranger to the space station, albeit his 3 previous missions were during the assembly phase of the international outpost. His crewmates, Woody Hoberg, Sultan Al-Nayati, and Andrei Fadyaev, are, of course, first-time flyers.
Still station on 3 for Fridge.
Duke, you must be psychic. I was just about to call you.
I had a feeling. Let me know what I need to do.
Yeah, we are seeing trouble with Fridge 2, so if you don't mind shutting it down for us, just tap the screen, hit the power button in the bottom left, press OK to shut it down.
Okay, copy. I'm in work.
Once it starts shutting down, it's eventually going to say safe to power off. Once it says safe to power off, you're going to switch Fridge 2, the power switch on the galley control panel. At the bottom of the rack, you're going to switch that off.
Payload controllers at the Payload Operations Center in Huntsville, Alabama, at the Marshall Space Flight Center, talking to Nicole Mann on board the station. Once the safety briefing is concluded and a few hours of orientation for the newly arrived crew members gets underway, the 11 crew members will go into an extended sleep period throughout the day on Friday, catching their breath after a fairly hectic week of activities. Handover activities between the Crew-6 crew and the Crew-5 crew will span over the next 5 days in order to make sure that Crew-6 is all set to begin its increment in earnest. The Crew-5 crew members are scheduled to undock from the space station somewhere in the neighborhood of around March 9th. A specific date will be further refined, likely early next week, after the ballistic trajectory of deorbit opportunities and weather conditions are assessed by both SpaceX, the Commercial Crew Program, and the International Space Station Program. Koichi Wakata of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency and Josh Cassida working to begin setting up cameras that will document hatch opening and the welcoming ceremony. Again, we expect hatches to open somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2:10 a.m. Central Time, with a welcoming ceremony to follow somewhere between 2:45 and 3 a.m. Central Time. On Thursday, Roscosmos cosmonauts Sergei Prokopyev, who is the station commander, and Dmitry Petelin transferred their custom-made Soyuz seedliners from the damaged Soyuz MS-22 spacecraft over to the newly arrived Soyuz MS-23 spacecraft that will be their ride home later this year with NASA's Frank Rubio. Rubio will transfer his Soyuz seedliner that's temporarily parked in the Crew-5 Crew Dragon Endurance over to the newly arrived Soyuz vehicle next Monday.
And Koichi, we're checking. Station Houston on Space Ground 3 for Koichi and Node 2 view. We will want to be using the Node 2 camera for the PO event.
Okay, the camera 2 of Node 2. Thank you.
Station Houston on Space Ground 3 for Josh.
Go ahead on 3, David.
Hey Josh, leak check's complete. You're a go to proceed with ingress part 2 and step 3.1. You have a go to open the APEX equalization valve.
Okay, we're in work.
This is Mission Control Houston. Nicole Mann on the right-hand corner of your screen. And at the hatchway to the Crew Dragon Endeavour is Josh Cassada doing a visual inspection of the area right at the hatch where pressure is in the process of being equalized, part of the leak check process that will lead to the opening of the hatches somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2:10 a.m. Central Time, about 25 minutes or so from now. We're expecting the welcoming ceremony where the Crew-6 crew members will join the rest of the Expedition 68 crew and become part of that Expedition 68 crew. That welcoming ceremony will be somewhere between 2:45 a.m. and 3 a.m. Central Time, after which the 11 crew members on board the station will conduct a joint safety briefing conducted by Russian Roscosmos cosmonaut Sergei Prokopyev, part of the standard operating procedures that will set the stage for the start of about a 5-day handover.
Dragon SpaceX on Dragon Aground for status.
And SpaceX Dragon, go ahead.
Hey, just wanted to check in and see if we could come back on board.
You can come on board.
Copy.
Cameras are back on board.
Houston Station on 2, the APAS hatch is open and there is 0 condensation.
Station Houston, we copy. Great news.
This is Mission Control Houston. We're expecting to regain our downlink television from the International Space Station momentarily after a brief handover between satellites on our tracking and data relay satellite system. Leak checks on both sides of the docking interface between Crew Dragon Endeavour and the Harmony module docking port at the International Space Station ongoing and going very well. We're expecting hatch opening sometime in the next 20 minutes, perhaps a bit sooner. We'll keep you updated on all of that activity. The welcoming ceremony between the crew members, the newly arrived Crew-6 crew members, who will join their Expedition 68 crewmates, is expected somewhere between about 2:45 a.m. and 3 a.m. Central Time. Docking occurred at 12:40 a.m. Central Time. Endeavour held about 20 meters away from its docking port on the space-facing side of the Harmony module for several minutes to allow SpaceX engineers to psych out a software issue with one of the hooks. The hook itself was operating in nominal configuration, but a micro switch indicating its performance was being a bit balky. So the SpaceX engineers had to test out a software patch, and once that was verified, the command was given to override that micro switch and to proceed in the final 20 meters for docking. Nicole Mann in the foreground, right at the hatchway, is Josh Cassida wearing the headlamp as they continue leak checks on their side of the docking interface. They'll be joined by Koichi Wakata, Anna Kikina, Sergei Prokopiev, Dmitry Petelin. Eleven crew members will be on board the International Space Station for about the next 5 days or so. An official departure date for the Crew-5 crew, that being Mann, Cassida, Wakata, and Kikina, will be likely determined early next week after ballistics, trajectory information, deorbit opportunities, and weather is assessed by the International Space Station and commercial crew programs, SpaceX, and NASA officials who will discuss the best options for bringing the Crew-5 crew home. Once the hatches are open, and there's Frank Rubio now in the field of view, he will be transferring his custom-made Soyuz seedliner from the Crew-5 Dragon Endurance, where it is temporarily housed, into the newly arrived Soyuz MS-23 spacecraft that is docked to the Poisk module of the International Space Station. That Soyuz seedliner transfer will accompany the Soyuz seedliner transfer that Prokopiev and Petelin undertook on Thursday, and that will put the Soyuz MS-23 in a ready-made departure capability, and will complete the work necessary to bring that newly arrived Soyuz back into full return capability for Rubio, Prokopiev, and Petelin, who will return to Earth in that newly arrived vehicle later this year.
For Dragon hatch equalization.
Nicole Mann reporting that we're ready to equalize the pressure on both sides of the docking interface right at that vestibule juncture point.
Houston, station on 2, com check.
Station Houston on 2, we hear you loud and clear. Sorry, I should have given you a checking. Yeah, we copy you're ready. Dragon crew still working through some procedures, and they're getting there, but it's going to be a bit.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Should be about 20 minutes or so you guys have some time.
Station copies. Thanks.
Dragon SpaceX low priority on Dragon to ground.
There's a view inside the Crew Dragon Endeavour that docked to the International Space Station about an hour and 25 minutes ago. The 4 crew members out of their launch and entry suits and into more comfortable flight clothing as they prepare to open the hatch on their side of the docking interface and move inside the Harmony module to be greeted by their soon-to-be Expedition 68 colleagues. The expedition designation of Expedition 68 is still in progress and will continue until the undocking on March 28th of the damaged Soyuz MS-22 spacecraft that will make an uncrewed parachute-assisted landing on the steppe of Kazakhstan. At the point of undocking of MS-22, Expedition 69 will begin, still under the command of Roscosmos cosmonaut Sergei Prokopyev.
Dragon SpaceX on Dragon ground for timeline. Dragon SpaceX on Dragon ground for timeline. Dragon SpaceX on the big loop for crew timeline.
SpaceX Dragon's with you.
Hey, we're just looking for a timeline. Do we have suits drying yet?
Hey, firm, we are 57 minutes into the suit drying. We tried to call you earlier on Dragon to Ground with no joy. So 3 minutes left on suit drying, and then we'll be, that's the blockers and most of the rest of our procedures.
Yeah, copy. You are actually go for 4.400 sections 1 through 3. So we'll be ready to record your inventory when ready.
Okay, copy. Go for 4.400 sections 1 through 3.
As we stand by for the completion of the pressure equalization between the two hatches, Crew Dragon Endeavour and Harmony, you're looking at Roscosmos cosmonaut Anna Kikina, who is in the final days of her 6-month stay aboard the International Space Station.
Station Houston on Space to Ground 2 for any available USOS crew member for scene and voice check.
With you on 2, and I can knock that out here in 02.
Hey, Frank, we copied. Thanks. We figured while you're waiting, let's go ahead and knock that out of the way.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. No response required. You are go for sections 1 through 5 on 4.400.
Houston Station on 2, ready for scene and voice check when you're ready.
Frank, we are ready. Frank, that was a good audio check. If we could get the camera view leveled, just try to level it out with the forward bulkhead.
Okay, how does that camera view work for you guys?
Frank, that is fantastic. You have the magic touch. We're good with both video and audio.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks so much.
Station Houston on Space Ground 2 for Frank for scene. Hey Frank, those looks like there's an Ethernet cable and another cable that are in the scene on the starboard side. If there's any way you could just tuck those cables out of the way. Yeah, if you're looking at the camera, exactly, that's it right there. If you could just tuck those out of the way, that way they won't be in the way of any of the 11 crew members that are going to fit in there. That'd be great.
This is Mission Control Houston. We're nearing the completion of the pressure equalization across the hatchway between the Crew Dragon Endeavour and the Harmony module of the International Space Station as the Expedition 68 crew members, Frank Rubio in the field of view, Koichi Wakata had just floated out of the field of view, are preparing for the opening of the hatch. There he is. There's Wakata. The hatches will be opened, and we'll be starting a welcoming ceremony just a few minutes after that to greet the newly arrived Crew-6 crew, Commander Steve Bowen, pilot Woody Hoberg, and mission specialists Sultan Al-Niyati and Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrei Fedyaev. There is Al-Niyati aboard the Crew Dragon Endeavour, embarking on the first long-duration space flight by an Emirati astronaut.
SpaceX Dragon's with you. Go ahead.
Yeah, due to the earlier delays, we're a little behind on the timeline, but understand crew are working through procedure 4.400. We'd like you to focus on completing sections 1 through 5 in order to support Dragon Hatch open. We can come back for suit stowage at a later time.
Okay, we copy. We looked at section 1 of 4.400, and we saw we need to buckle all the seatbelts, so we were trying to get the suits out of the way for that. Confirm we can just hold off on that step to 1.5 for now?
Yeah, confirm. We can come back to that. but the inventory and Section 5 for the waste system flush is critical to complete prior to hatch open.
Okay, we copy. We'll put that in work right now.
Copy all, and just looking at the commander cam, it looks like we still have a cap on there.
Once again, the view inside the Crew Dragon Endeavour, a good view on the right of Commander Steve Bowen.
That's beautiful, thanks.
And pilot Woody Hoberg in the foreground. Just a few minutes away from hatch opening, to be followed by a welcoming ceremony, and then a safety briefing for all 11 crew members, comprising the expanded Expedition 68 crew. Endeavour docked to the Zenith port, the space-facing port of the Harmony module of the International Space Station, a little less than 2 hours ago at 12:40 a.m. Central Time, 1:40 a.m. Eastern Time. Hooks closed 11 minutes later to form a hard mate between the two spacecraft. Leak checks have been ongoing and are nearly complete, and pressure at the docking interface is being equalized as the forerunner to the opening of the hatch. The Crew-6 crew on board the Dragon Endeavour that you're watching right now, in the final stages of securing their spacecraft prior to hatch opening. Woody Hoberg in the foreground, Sultan Al Niyati behind him. Suits are being stowed. Pressure is being equalized across the docking interface between Crew Dragon and the Harmony module. That will be the precursor to the opening of the hatch and the start of a welcoming ceremony involving all 11 crew members of Expedition 68. The Crew-5 crew of Nicole Mann, Josh Cassada, Koichi Wakata, and Anna Kikina are due to depart the International Space Station late next week, a date yet to be firmly selected by the Commercial Crew Program and the International Space Station Program. That departure date will be evaluated based on the orbit opportunities and the weather forecast, and will come into clearer focus early next week.
Station Houston on Space Ground 2 for Frank.
Down 2.
Hey Frank, we just wanted to give you a rundown of our plan for the PAO event. So after hatch opening, we'll give you guys like 5 to 10 minutes, and then just call us when you're ready to start the PAO event. How's that sound?
Okay, that sounds great. And are we still going to be on with Kathy, Ken, and Hamad?
And Frank, yes, so there will be no Ken. Sorry.
Okay, copy. Just Kathy and Hamad. Hey, and just for a little coordination, I know the back and forth that's on the Word document, but after I kind of say, we hear you loud and clear, I'll say a quick welcome, but I would also like to hand it off to Sergey as the commander and just give him a chance to say hi, and then we'll turn it over to Kathy.
Frank, that sounds great. That's a good plan.
Okay, thanks so much.
SpaceX Dragon for water and food inventory.
SpaceX ready to copy.
All right, I'll start with water. We consumed all 5 bottles from location 203, all 5 bottles from location 207, and 3 bottles from location 208.
Copy. 5 bottles from location 203, 5 bottles from location 207, and 3 bottles from location 208.
Again, a good view inside the Crew Dragon Endeavour as the Crew-6 crew, having arrived at the International Space Station, completing the final stowage of equipment before hatch opening, that will enable them to move inside the complex that will be their home for the next half year.
SpaceX Dragon for food inventory.
SpaceX, ready to copy.
Okay, from location 301, we consumed 2 snacks and 2 dinners. From location 302, we consumed 2 breakfasts. Location 309, 1 breakfast. And location 310, 2 snacks and 2 dinners.
Copy. From location 301, 2 snacks and 2 dinners. From location 302, 2 breakfasts. From location 309, 1 breakfast. And from location 310, 2 snacks and 2 dinners.
Read that correct.
Inside the Harmony module of the International Space Station, from left to right, Koichi Wakata, Josh Cassada, Anna Kikina, as the final few steps of the equalization of pressure across the docking interface is underway. That should all be in order just a moment or two from now, leading to the opening of the hatch. This is Mission Control Houston. Standing by is the Crew-6 crew still on board the Crew Dragon Endeavor. Complete the final stowage of some of the equipment that they used and their suits that they rode to orbit in. And for the final phase of today's rendezvous and docking to the space-facing port of the Harmony module. Meanwhile, inside Harmony, awaiting hatch opening, Anna Kikina on the left, Josh Cassida on the right.
Station Houston on Space Ground 2. We're still looking at 5 to 10 minutes before hatch opening.
Okay, station copies.
SpaceX Dragon, we are in section 6 of 4.400. We are ready for Dragon hatch equalization.
Copy, Dragon, ready for hatch equalization.
Dragon Station, this is Houston. Stand by for equalization, expected to take 2 minutes.
This is Mission Control Houston. So the final step of equalization of pressure across the docking interface about to begin. It will take about 2 minutes for that pressure to be equalized, and that should be the final step prior to hatch opening. Once the hatch opens and the Crew-6 crew floats on board the station, it will take just a few minutes for them to get set up for the welcoming ceremony involving all 11 crew members to greet the newly arrived Crew-6 quartet of Steve Bowen and Woody Hoburg, who you see in the field of view, along with Emirati astronaut Sultan Al-Niyati and Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrei Fedyaev. Sultan Al-Niyati at the top of your screen, the second Emirati astronaut to fly in space, and at the beginning now of what will be the first long-duration flight by an Emirati astronaut. The equalization of pressure across the docking interface about to be completed as the Crew-6 crew prepares to open the hatch and come on board the International Space Station. It has been just a shade over 2 hours since Endeavour docked to the space-facing port of the Harmony module. That occurred at 12:40 a.m. Central Time, 1:40 a.m. Eastern Time.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, you are go for hatch opening per decal, followed by the remaining actions in procedure 4.400, section 6. How copy?
Copy. We have a go for hatch opening per decal and 4.400, section 6.
It's a good readback, Steve.
And the hatch to the Crew Dragon Endeavour is open at 2:45 a.m. Central Time, 3:45 a.m. Eastern Time. Again, Dragon's hatch opened at 2:45 a.m. Central, 3:45 a.m. Eastern Time. You see the rest of the Expedition 68 crew now gathering at the hatchway in the Harmony module. Station Commander Sergei Prokopiev on the right, joined by his Roscosmos colleagues Anna Kikina and Dmitry Patelin. The other NASA and JAXA astronaut crew members will be joining just a moment or two from now, as the station hatch will shortly be opened and the Crew-6 crew will float on board. Hatch opening occurring again at 2:45 a.m. Central. On the Dragon side, as the International Space Station flew 260 miles off the southeast coast of Australia. Steve Bowen on board the International Space Station. Woody Hoberg now on board. Sultan Al Nayati comes on board the International Space Station. And Andrei Fedyaev. So the Crew-6 board, the Crew-6 crew is now on board the International Space Station. They'll take a few minutes to complete greetings between each other before they set up for the welcoming ceremony. So the International Space Station now a crew of 11 crew members for the next week. Once again, hatch opening occurring at 2:45 a.m. Central Time, 3:45 a.m. Eastern Time. The International Space Station was flying at an altitude of 260 miles off the southeast coast of Australia. The Crew-6 crew on board, veteran Steve Bowen and 3 first-time flyers, joining Nicole Mann, Josh Cassada, Koichi Wakata, and Anna Kikina, along with Sergei Prokopiev and Dmitry Patelin. And Frank Rubio, who's at the hatchway right next to Sultan Al-Nayati, the first Emirati astronaut to embark on a long-duration spaceflight, the second Emirati astronaut to fly in space. Steve Bowen on board the station now for the 4th time. His first 3 flights were all assembly missions on the space shuttle.
Houston Station on 2. We will be ready to start the PAO event in about 3 to 4 minutes.
We copy. Sounds great.
And we are expecting the welcoming ceremony to begin about 3 minutes from now. The crew getting set up. The first opportunity to hear from the Crew-6 crew after arriving on board the International Space Station, with docking having occurred at 12:40 a.m. Central Time, followed 11 minutes later by the closing of the hooks to form a hard mate between the Crew Dragon Endeavour and the Harmony module. Hatches were opened at 2:45 a.m. Central Time.
Houston on Space Ground 2 for comm. For this PO event, we will have a loss of KU. We'll have a handover from 9:14 to 9:15, so you'll lose audio and video with your party at that time.
Okay, station copies. 9:14 to 9:15.
That's affirmative, and we'll pick it back up once we get AOS for KU.
Okay, we copy. And are you going to let us know right before that, so we'll stop with whatever comments are going on at that moment?
We're checking, Josh. And Josh, back with you guys on 2. If we find a convenient spot to give you a heads up, we'll do that. But if we're in the middle of the event, we'll just lose you and pick you back up on the other side.
Okay, we copy that. Just a heads up, we do have Space Ground 3 up. If you wanted to pass it there, then it wouldn't make it to the outside world, but we'd hear you.
Station Houston on Space Ground 2. Hey, Josh. Yeah, that sounds great to us. I'll give you guys a call on 3 when we're about to lose our KU, and then you guys can just continue with the event.
Sounds great, David. Thank you. All right, David, we are set up. If you want to do one more scene check with the entire crew, I think we're in our positions. Let us know how this works for you.
You guys look outstanding. Station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
Houston, this is Station. We are ready for the event.
NASA Leadership, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call Station for a voice check.
Station, this is Kathy Leaders. How do you hear me?
Kathy, we have you loud and clear. It's great to hear your voice.
Well, I'm really, we created a little bit of anticipation there at the end for the Crew-6 folks, making you wait a little bit longer before you got to station. But as always, it's so great to see you all come safely through the hatch and join your crew members on station. You know, this is going to be next 6 months are just going to be packed full of very critical events. And one of the first critical events is getting your Crew-5 crewmates ready to come back down to Earth. But we're really looking forward to all the great science, hopefully a couple of EVAs and updates on some new solar arrays, and you'll have a few more crew vehicles coming up during this period of time too. So as always, we're super proud of you and looking forward to all the great things you'll be doing. And I'm proud to introduce Hamad Al-Mansouri, and hopefully he's here on the line too to be able to give you some comments.
All right, Kathy, well, thank you so much. We couldn't agree more. While we wait for... there's Hamad. Great. We are ready for your comments, Hamad. Thank you.
Astronaut Steve, Woody, Sultan, and cosmonaut Andre, and little astronaut Sohail. Congratulations to all of you on your successful arrival to the International Space Station. Your mission to space represents a huge milestone for SpaceX, NASA, and the United Arab Emirates. Crew-6, you become part of our community back home in the United Arab Emirates. Please allow me to say a few words in Arabic. براشد، السلام عليكم. تستاهلون سلامة الوصول للمحطة الدولية. ثقتنا فيكم كبيرة. أنت اليوم ما تمثل الإمارات فقط، تمثل العرب كلهم. أنت إن شاء الله بتكون بداية انطلاقة رحلات طويلة المدى للفضاء بالنسبة للعرب. تذكر دائما كلمة سيدي صاحب سمو الشيخ محمد بن زايد، إن الوطن وشعب الإمارات كله معك. اتذكر كذلك أن بهاي المهمة نحن نجسد توجيهات سيدي صاحب السمو الشيخ محمد بن راشد أن بعد هزاع المنصوري أن هناك سوف تكون طوابير تستكمل المهمة طموح زايد. نتمنى لك ولفريقك كل التوفيق. الله يحفظكم وترجعون سالمين إلى أرض الوطن. I wish you all safe and successful mission. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ahmad, and thank you, Kathy, and we couldn't agree more. There is no better highlight than welcoming our friends to the International Space Station. And so congratulations with that to the SpaceX team, to the NASA team, and also to the team at the UAE. We're looking forward to the next few months that we get to spend with our friends, and it's going to be awesome. With that, I'll pass it off to the ISS commander, Sergey.
Hello, everybody. So glad to hear our friends, and this is amazing to see your smile here, and we're looking forward to work together. And Steve, Sultan, Andrei, Woody, my congratulations for joining us. And first of all, I say congratulate the who first time in space. This is an important part of your life. Andrei became cosmonauts, Woody and Sultan astronauts, real astronauts now. And I wish you good wellness here, and happy flight, and amazing impressions here. Looking forward to work together, and my congratulations again.
Okay, and now we pass it off to the Crew-6 commander, Steve Bowen.
It's great to be on board finally after a short delay, just outside taking a look at the station, I guess. It's a real privilege to be here again. It's been 11 years since I've been here. It still looks like the space station, maybe a little more crowded, a few more wires. I'm looking forward to same Koichi, that is true. It is the same Koichi. Looking forward to spending the next 6 months working on board and sending Crew-5 home after a lot of well-deserved rest after some hard work. And over to Woody.
Well, thank you. It's just incredible to be here as a rookie flyer. I just can't believe, you know, after years of training, it's the real place, and it looks just like, almost just like Building 9 at Johnson Space Center. So, yeah, I couldn't be happier with this amazing Crew-6 is an amazing group of people, and I'm really honored and privileged to join Expedition 68. Frank, we're looking forward to spending a bit more time with you than you had originally bargained. We're going to learn a lot from you, and I'm just so happy to be here.
Luckily, I survived the first stunt. Yeah, allow me to say a few words in Arabic. شكرا جزيلا لكل من وقف معانا. الحمد لله وصلنا محطة فضاء الدولية. شكرا لأمي وأبوي، شكرا لعائلتي، لقيادتنا الرشيدة اللي أعطتنا الثقة هذه. اللهم لك الحمد. الإمارات تخطو خطوات جبارة، إن شاء الله تتلوها خطوات أكبر إن شاء الله في المستقبل. هذا كله بفضل القيادة الرشيدة ونظرتها والتعاون الدولي اللي تتبعه دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة. الفضاء مجال واسع، مرحب طبعا بالتعاون الدولي. الإمارات تخطو خطوات جبارة في هذا المجال، اللهم لك الحمد. شراكتنا هذه المرة جاءت في سياق أن نقوم بمهمة طويلة الأمد فيها منفعة للبشرية ومنفعة للإنسانية، وكذلك الابحاث العلميه اللي ان شاء الله ترجع بالمنفعه للجميع. So thank you everybody for this opportunity. I would like to thank my family, my parents, the leadership in the UAE, the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center that gave me the trust to conduct this mission. I can't be happier than this. I mean, seeing old friends in space, gathering as a big family. This is the essence of space exploration. The UAE is taking great steps towards pushing the boundaries of exploration and cooperating with the spacefaring nation to explore more, to seek new endeavors into space. So again, I said it before, but I say it again, go Dragon, go SpaceX.
Ну что ж, всем большой-большой привет. Я очень рад быть здесь, во-первых. Ну и, соответственно, видеть и ваши тоже экипаж, и Союза, и экипаж Crew-6, улыбающиеся лица, которые рады нас здесь были встретить. Вот. Спасибо большое всем за подготовку, всем, кто так или иначе принимает участие вообще во всей этой большой работе Международной космической станции. Ну и, конечно, хочу передать привет своей семье, своей маме, своим близким. Большое спасибо за все, что вы для меня тоже сделали, за крайние дни, за поздравления. Ну и обязательно хочу сказать тоже большое спасибо всем тем, кто помогал и помогает до сих пор сейчас еще моей семье. Не бросайте их там. Всем привет. Вот. У меня все.
All right, guys, once again, welcome. And with that, Kathy, over to you.
Well, thank you again for all the hard work. And it's so great to see all 11 of you there representing so many different countries, because like all of you talked about, this is what it's like about space exploration, for us all to be working together, living and working peacefully in space. So thank you. Looking forward to all the great accomplishments that will be coming, and looking to get Crew-5 safely home. Appreciate it.
All right, that'll wrap it.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the event. Thank you.
Houston ACR, we copy. Thank you.
Station. We are now resuming operational audio communications.
Station.
This is Mission Control Houston, the welcoming ceremony having been completed and the International Space Station's population having grown to 11 for the next week. The crew will set out now to conduct a mandatory and customary safety briefing to be conducted by Station Commander Sergei Prokopiev, so that they can become familiar with evacuation routes, should that become necessary, and other evacuation and emergency procedures. The crew has a lot of work that lies ahead over the next several hours, and then we'll have an off-duty day for the remainder of the day on Friday before continuing their handover activities as Crew-5 now takes center stage to prepare for its return to Earth late next week. With that, we're going to wrap up our coverage. Crew-6 safely on board the International Space Station, beginning their 6-month stay on the International Outpost. Docking occurring at 12:40 a.m. Central Time. The hatch is opened about 2 hours and 5 minutes later, and 11 crew members now set out for a handover period over the next week. Work continues unabated on board the International Space Station. We thank you for joining us throughout the course of the day and evening, and throughout the course of Crew-6's journey to the International Space Station. With that, we'll sign off for now. Have a great weekend. This is Mission Control Houston.